everyone. Welcome to another Malts with Mates. Today we've got James McIntosh of Larkfire. James, how you doing today, mate?
I'm really well, thanks. Yeah, I'm enjoying the sunshine, which is beautiful. So long may it continue, I think.
Oh yeah, no, it's absolutely stunning. I've got the curtains slightly closed because I get some glare if not, but otherwise I'd have them full open and this place would just be filled with light. But you poured yourself a drink just earlier. What are you drinking today, mate?
I've got an 18-year-old Jura, which is rather nice actually. We recently did a tasting with Jura, and it is it's definitely a firm favourite for me, certainly at the moment. Yeah, no, it's absolutely spot on actually. So I think it's going to add a bit of the Larkfire actually. But yeah, we did a recent tasting with them for Lewis, for the community in Lewis, and had a little bit left over actually from the tasting, and well, even less now, should we say? But it's absolutely lovely.
No, it's fantastic, and I guess that does bring us really neatly on to the main thing. You're the first person I've had on who's not a whiskey distillery or brand. You do water. You do Larkfire water. Please, what can you tell us about Larkfire?
Oh, plenty. I suppose the best place to start is the beginning. I was it's a funny one. I was in London, sitting with a friend in a pub who's actually the co-founder now, and we were having a dram, and we were just lamenting the fact that we'd ordered the dram and we wanted some water to go with it, and the water that came was London's finest tap water, which, as quite a few people know, has probably been through 11 people, contains all sorts of horrible things. Contains a lot of estrogen as well, so it's probably the reason I've got these bad man moves, or whatever they're called, moves. But essentially, we're thinking we've got these absolutely fabulous drams that we were tucking into, and thinking, well, why would somebody age, for example, this Jura, why did they age it for 18 years and take such care and love over it, and then you add, a sploosh of horrible Thames tap water. It obviously does its job, Thames tap water, don't get me wrong, but adding it to an 18-year-old Jura, I think, would be crazy. And so we started this conversation, which was, well, what if this water is so bad, what is the best water for whiskey? And that was a conversation we had probably in about 2017, and we thought, well, let's spend some time looking into it. And so that's where we sort of started, and we had a lot of discussions. So I'm an Anglo-Scot, so my parents, or my father's Scottish, grandfather was from Glasgow, and my co-founder's from Orkney. So we really love the islands and Scotland, and we just thought, well, what can we bring some of that fabulous water down, or can we bring it to so everyone gets the opportunity to drink it as it should be drunk. So that was the sort of starting point. So it was sort of where do we start? How do we sort of break it down into what are we looking for? What makes an amazing water to go with whiskey? So we decided that there were sort of two aspects to follow on this. One of them was the science. So we all know that whiskey's a very, very complex drink. It's got so much going on, and comparing whiskies even from the same distillery, it's amazing whether they're in a different cask, or how they're produced, the age. There's so many different qualities and reasons for enjoying a particular type of whiskey. What is it that we're looking to bring out, and what water goes best with all of these? And we're looking for a water that would sort of go with all whiskey, because we just felt that, we couldn't regionalise it. I mean, you look at the Highlands, for example, it covers such a large area, and all the distilleries are using different water sources. So we narrowed it down to science and sensory. At the time, I think it was sort of 2018, we became aware that a couple of chemists over in Sweden were carrying out a study which was around dilution. And these guys were Bjorn Carlson and Rand Friedman. So we got in touch with those guys, and I suppose essentially what that study told us was why we dilute whiskey. So understanding that sort of premise, from a scientific purpose, what happens when you dilute whiskey? Why should we dilute whiskey? Obviously, it's an age-old question, and we are definitely from the camp that says drinking whiskey is about enjoyment. How you take it is absolutely your choice. So we'd never say to anyone you have to take it with water. What we were interested to know was, what was the best water. So we had a conversation with the guys over in Sweden, and really tried to understand and get under the skin of if you're adding water. So I suppose the study said yes. Their answer to the study, which was based on a model, was yes, you should add water to whiskey, and the dilution rate you should try to get down to about 28% in terms of the alcohol ABV level. And the reason for this was that the alcohol attaches itself to the compounds. So anything sort of around 40%, the ethanol, the compound, the flavour compounds attached to the ethanol. So that sort of holds the flavour compounds into the body of the drink. So when you add water, what happens is the ethanol releases the flavour compounds, and what you'll find is it'll come through on the nose and come through to the surface of the drink. So when you nose it, you should be more powerful, and also when you taste it, you should be able to sense some different sort of notes of the whiskey. Should sort of elaborate a little bit more. So that's the sort of very scientific approach. So obviously that's not sensory, and everybody tastes and smells different. Everybody's taste and smell is different. So that's very complex in its own right. So what we were interested from that point of view, or well, not that point of view, but from that study is, so adding water is great. What type of water, if we're going to take the water and dilute it to 28%, what type of water would serve this best? So on this basis, we discussed with them around, what sort of water, and they suggested, they came back quite quickly and said, well, because it's such a complex drink whiskey, anything you add to it is going to alter the flavour and the taste and the nose. So, for example, if you add a high mineral water, the minerals within that water is going to affect that end flavour. Now, what we were wanting to do was actually, bring the whiskey's the star of the show. The water is sort of the Robin to the Batman. All we're trying to do is make the whiskey the absolute star. So there was a couple of solutions in our minds. There was one, we'd use a distilled water, so take everything out. You can do that through reverse osmosis, things like that. But for us, it felt very unnatural. And whiskey is mostly organic. It's a wonderful drink, and it felt sort of unnatural to do something like serve it with distilled water. And distilled water is not very good for you either, because it leaches the minerals from your body. So that seemed like not the best thing to do. So the alternative was to look for a water that matched distilled water as much as possible. So we were looking for a water that was very, very pure. And we had very, very little mineral count. So that's sort of from a scientific point, that's where we sort of ended, was we need a water, and it has to be very, very low in mineral content, because we wanted a water that extended the notes and the nose of the whiskey, but had no influence, or as little influence as possible. And we considered also the idea that there's lots of distilleries. They have lots of, they all have different water sources. And when you're making when you're making whiskey, one of the rules is you've got to have a lot of water. And the other thing about Scotland is, in particular Scotland, actually, should I say, is that the water's mostly soft there because of the geology. But what we were looking for was a very, very ultra soft water, I guess. And so that sort of led us on to the next stage, which was a sensory approach. So we're sort of marrying the science with the sensory component. So the basis of the sensory approach was, what tastes best, what smells best. So we were looking for a water with no taste. We wanted it to be natural. So colour not so much, didn't bother us so much. So if it had a natural hue, which Larkfire actually has a slight tinge to it, which you can just see slightly if you hold it up to the light. It's not massive, but there is just a little hue. So it was all about taste, and it was all about getting a water that had very low mineral content. So the approach was firstly, we looked at, we got some tables of, some scientific tables of mineral content within waters throughout Scotland, including the islands. And then the next approach was narrowing it down. And what we did was we overlaid the mineral content on top of a map of Scotland. And then we looked at the geology. So it was really noticeable that, the geology affects the water significantly. So what we were looking for, very low mineral content, and we then sort of got on our bikes and travelled up and around places. We got soaked in lots of places, very muddy. It was really, it was incredible. The people were really nice, but they thought we were a bit mad. But we were sort of trudging up hills, looking at water, and there's lots of sort of scientific requirements for potable water. So, literally it was pretty horrible. And every time we sort of entered Scotland, it would be, howling, and, the rain would be horizontal. And eventually we found that the best water was over in Lewis. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason being that the rock there is Lewisham gneiss, which is really, really old. It's 3 billion years old. It's very, very hard, and it is insoluble. So if you ever fly over Lewis, or fly into Lewis, you fly into Stornoway from maybe Glasgow or wherever, what you'll see as you're coming into land, if it's not cloudy, so it's 50-50 whether you'll see any land actually, or probably those odds are too favourable actually. If you ever fly into Stornoway and it isn't raining or it isn't really cloudy, what you'll see is like huge puddles that stretch across the landscape, and these are all the lochs, freshwater lochs. So Lewis and Harris and the Outer Hebrides contain 15% of the freshwater supply that lies on the surface freshwater. So an incredible large amount for sort of a tiny few little islands. And what happens is, obviously it rains a lot, and the water sits on top of the rock, and then winds its way back into the sea. And it's like the hydraulic, the cycle, which is it rains, travels back into the sea, rains again, travels back into the sea, and that sort of seems to be in perpetual motion. With the only difference being the sort of horizontal nature of the wind that sort of drives it into your eyes occasionally. But so that's essentially what's happening. So in Lewis, in particular in Harris, the water is incredibly pure, incredibly low mineral content because it's not leaching anything from the rocks or the vegetation. So you're looking at incredibly low mineral content, and then. Following that, we did some sensory studies, and we took water from several places in Lewis, and we started working with the Stornoway Trust, which is the biggest landowner, well, I think it's the biggest community landowner in Scotland still. And it's been, the Stornoway Trust has been around since 1923, I think, and it was gifted to the people by Lord Leverhulme, who's the guy behind Lever Brothers. So his intention actually, coincidentally, was it was looking at canning pilchards. that was his big sort of business idea, and he wanted to do this in Stornoway. But it's sort of slightly strange now that we should be back on his land and we're canning water. I think it's quite a nice little idea that we've gone from pilchards to water. So we work with the Stornoway Trust, and we've got an agreement with them. We see it's very important to us that we work with the local communities, and we're in partnership producing the water with them. So our source comes from their land, and we work together to create Larkfire. And I suppose that's sort of like a potted history to the point of where we got the water, and then we obviously have now canned it, and we're sort of taking it to market in probably the worst time ever. First, pandemic in however long since Spanish flu or whatever. So there's challenges for everyone at the moment in the marketplace, but I think everyone's adapted, and actually it's been a bit of sort of I suppose lit spirit in the sense that everyone's really helpful and really want to help people get along, and we've certainly found that with working with the distilleries and people in general, really.
No, it's fantastic, and you are completely right. You have a fantastic product. The time, no one could have predicted this, but you have been really busy. You mentioned you had the tasting with Jura the other day. I've seen you've had multiple tastings online. Even though it's, you can't physically go out and meet people, I know that Larkfire, people are talking about it, people are saying everything. So, New Dram Drinker has just commented, and they've said that they were on the fence about whiskey water, but when they tried Larkfire, they were really impressed. So obviously you've got a great quality product. We do wish the timing was different, but just congratulations, first of all, because I'm trying it and it is amazing. What you said before about the scientific approach was really interesting as well, because as opposed to just bottling water from regional places, you went through a scientific method. You did say Lewis had the best water. I'd be curious, were there any places that you wanted to look at but potentially you couldn't? Maybe was there any geography stopping you?
Yeah, well, there's one place in particular actually, which is Orkney. So Orkney, so it's very close to the heart of my co-founder, and Orkney, strangely enough, is probably the only place, or one of very few places in Scotland that has hard water. So, strangely, we couldn't use their water because it was too hard, which would have been brilliant, and that would have been fantastic. But I mean, they still have great water, and the thing about Scotland is you'll always hear, everyone always says the same, and it is true. Scottish water is absolutely fantastic. I mean, it is. It's some of the best water in the world, and it's plentiful. What we're really sort of considering as well is the fact that when you're drinking a dram, you don't know necessarily where the water's coming from. So if it's tap water, what we can sort of normally say is that it's got chlorine in and it's got fluoride in. And what we found from a lot of our studies and tastings is that the effect of tap water and chlorine and fluoride on your dram is really considerable. And we did this, and we did a big blind tasting actually at Boisdale's in London, where we got a lot of writers into the room, and we did this blind test, which we were really frightened about. And it didn't go without a few hitches with mixed up jugs, etc. And anything like that can happen if you've sort of had 8 drams before lunch. I found that that's quite, it was quite a steely approach to doing a tasting. And we had to, Ranald MacDonald, who owns Boisdale's, wanted to do a further 8 after lunch, and we had to say, look, I don't think we'll be standing. But it was quite a good idea, I thought. But I think that we may have had a few casualties. But what we found is fluoride and chlorine, and we haven't done the science in this because really were about the enjoyment of whiskey. And, you know, if people want to look into this, you know, feel free. But what we found is the effect of chlorine and fluoride, we believe it's those two additives, makes the whiskey taste sour, gives it a catch in the back of the throat, and really scrambles the nose. And, you know, we found that through our tastings, and it was quite surprising for us. But, you know, having that as the sort of baseline, it sort of enabled us to see the differences. So we're always, you know, we will always suggest to people you compare waters and tap waters. And it's interesting also that we've done so much testing against other mineral waters, etc., and we find similar results. And it's absolutely fascinating. And we can't put, you know, I couldn't tell you exactly the reasons why this is happening, but, you know, I think we're sort of really justified in saying, you know, you want a water that is really pure, has got nothing in it. And then it's about the whiskey, you know, we're not the star in any way. It's about enjoying whiskey and getting more out of it. You were talking about some of the other tastings. So we did Lewis, which was brilliant. So over in Lewis, there's a guy called Ian Fowler who was just opening a whiskey shop. Well, he was about to in, I think it was March. And the timing was disastrous for him. And we got in touch with him and started talking, and we saw a sort of way that we could sort of help each other. So we wanted to do something for the community there, who've been so supportive of us. And so what we did was we put a tasting together, and we did that with the help of Ian as well. And it was absolutely brilliant. It was the funniest thing I think I've done ever. So we had effectively Lewis and Harris. So we had Harris at one end of the island and Lewis at the other, and it was sort of like there was so much one-upmanship, and well, our pubs are better than yours, and it was absolutely hilarious. And there's sort of little battles going on everywhere, but it made for such a fun event. And then afterwards, I was lucky enough to be invited to a sort of Zoom Ceilidh, which, you know, I'd never heard of or thought about that before, but it was just a little bit mental. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And these people, you know, they've been so, you know, everyone's been affected by COVID and the pandemic, but I really feel for these guys. I mean, they're quite isolated anyway, but the fact that the tourism's out and, you know, things are shut, and, you know, it's sort of, we could actually learn quite a lot, I think, from their sense of community, because they're so used to it. And, you know, it really struck me what a fabulous occasion. And likewise, we did one in Orkney, and it was very similar. And we had a lot of the sort of tourist trade, hoteliers, and again, just fabulous people. And we had a lady called Rosemary on, who was giving us sort of, she hadn't, I'm not sure, I think Zoom might have got the better of her, or she knew exactly what she was doing, but she was able to give us a lot of, she was able to tell us a lot about the water and what she thought about it and how it compared to a tap water. And it was just absolutely brilliant, and just, you know, great folk. So we've been trying to do these tastings, and we've done we did a World Whiskies one. So we're quite interested in looking at, you know, the effect of Larkfire with, the World Whiskies was with Starward, and with Whistle Pig and JJ Corrie. And it was fascinating because it had a very similar effect, really. And I hadn't tried a rye whiskey. I'm just gonna finish this, and I'll just give it a rinse around. But I've got some of the Whistle Pig, but it was amazing, the effect, for me anyway, trying Larkfire with Whistle Pig. It was really fascinating because the whole mouthfeel was just so soft, and it just seemed to work so well. I was absolutely flabbergasted, because all these sort of tastings have been blind to a certain extent. We didn't know what the effects would be, and we've been really pleased that, you know, people have been saying very kind and nice things about the water and the effects it has. But, you know, with an American rye whiskey and with the Australian whiskey, we just did not know what would happen. We were so pleasantly surprised, but particularly with the Whistle Pig, it just sort of, the effect was, obviously, it was carrying a lot of spice and some, really interesting notes of spearmint and quite grassy and green appley. Really, it's a really lovely drink. But what we found with when we added the Larkfire was it just became a lot creamier, and it sort of became just such a drinkable drink. In fact, having to keep my sort of leftover of the bottle away from my wife because she seemed to like it so much. Got those real sort of butterscotch notes at the end, and it's just a delightful drink, which was completely new to me, but absolutely delicious. But so much spearmint and.
Oh, I believe I've got the sample you're talking about, the 10-year-old from 10-year from Axiom Brands. Yes, and I've tried it. I had a bottle of the Starward Nova, and I was trying that. And what you said earlier, where you mentioned the chlorine and the fluorides of a tap water were often sour whiskey. I've had Starward Nova with tap water before, and now trying it with the Lark, and there is actually a huge difference. And when you say the sourness and the tartness on the back of the palate, that's exactly what it is. You could just be really good with marketing, but it is exactly that. And I'm noticing even now, I've added some water to all of my whiskeys, and they're so much clearer, and it really is something spectacular. I'm absolutely loving it. I'm going to have to order a couple more cans. I've got another question, by the way, from a new dram drinker. Is curious. I was going to ask this later, but we'll ask it now. Was Larkfire always going to be the name, or did you have any other contenders?
Yeah, we did. Right. Actually, it's quite a funny story, this. Well, it depends. Well, no, quite funny. Well, we had a couple of contenders. We always liked Larkfire, but we were concerned about, well, not with Larkfire, but we sort of took it from a sort of business approach in terms of name and thinking about if you're going to build a brand, your requirements in terms of what already exists, etc. So from a trademark point of view, we were, keen to sort of make sure that we sort of had unfettered access. So one of the names, so there were two which we liked. There was Larkfire, which was the sort of probably there or thereabouts, and Rainwater we quite liked, spelled EIGN, Rainwater, which was nice, but I think there was some sort of trademark issue with that. The other one was Whet, WHET, which we quite liked. Now, I don't know if anyone's familiar or you're familiar with the film. Oh God, what is that film called? It's completely escaped me, but it's got Andy Samberg, and it's about a stuntman, and he is a terrible stuntman. I'll have to remember what the film is. My daughter would tell me, but
I think it's just called Stuntman. I watched it about 2 weeks ago.
Right.
No, I think it's just called Stuntman. Yeah.
Right. There's a brilliant bit,
yeah.
And I think maybe somebody was taking the piss when they suggested it, actually. But basically, what happens is he's on a not a trike. It is like a soapbox thing, So what would you call it? Go-kart. So he's on a go-kart, and he's got a helmet on, and he's trying to jump 18 bikes or something on this, and he's got a safe word, and his safe word is whisky or whet. And it just struck me then, that word, whet. It would have been an absolute disaster. Andy Samberg says whet as his safe word. So I was quite funny, but it's a brilliant film, actually. It's really funny. But that would have been a disaster. So yeah, that would have been a disaster for us. So Larkfire, the reason why we're called Larkfire is, the lark signifies a spiritual awakening. So it's like the start of the day, spiritual awakening, and the fire represents community coming together. So around a fire, sort of in ages past, everyone used to meet and sit around a fire and talk and share their stories of the day, and we just sort of like that. Sort of evoked what we're trying to get over in terms of, bring community together and, this sort of idea of waking the spirit and getting the best out. And we're sort of, as I said, it is about the enjoyment of whiskey. We're not people who would, we would never tell anyone how to drink the whiskey. And when we add water, it's sort of a sploosh or a splash. We're not sort of measuring it. And I know a lot of people take it very seriously about how many drops are, but for me personally, I sort of splash it in and I sort of taste it first, but I'm trying to get to that point where I feel it sort of sits, I can get the flavour in the nose and the taste, but it just sort of sits comfortably with me. And my wife, I mentioned earlier, she just puts lots in and takes all the heat out. But I think ultimately we're trying to make whiskey accessible, and we should encourage people to drink it however they want. With whatever they want as well. It could benefit everyone. So, yeah, a splash for me.
Well, cheers to that. I agree with you 100%, and it's great to see you thinking not just of the whiskey, but how we drink whiskey and the things outside of it, because we do, as a community and as an industry, we do tend to get bogged down in here's everything that's made the whiskey, but then how you drink it is often just an afterthought. But for someone to actually go out and make a water that you can have as much or as little as you like in your whiskey to really change the flavor, I think that's stunning and fantastic. Moving forward as well, Scotland's got the best water in the world, but you said earlier that the guys doing the study were Swedish. Do you think at any point in time you might go to a different country and maybe bottle some of their water to experiment with different waters to add to whiskey? Is that something that could be on the cards, or is that too far down the line?
Well, we've discussed it, but what we just did, we all said when we were sort of setting up and talking about getting this best water. The idea was that we created a water that suited whiskey, all whiskey. So the reason being is that, it's always going to be this, it's never going to be the star of the show. Whiskey is always going to be the most important aspect. We don't really buy into the theory that, the best water is necessarily from where the whiskey is made, because we know that the actions in terms of, what happens in production and the process that take place mean that, ultimately it's just lacking. It doesn't really significantly alter the whiskey, really. It's just that it's plentiful. So what we're after was a water that had very low mineral content that could sort of serve all whiskies, really, because, it's so low in mineral content that it should have the same, it should bring out the same characteristics in all the whiskey. And it's certainly what we found in terms of testing it with, Irish whiskies, for example, and also with, Mike Meyer and Swedish, and also, obviously with Whistlepig. And, we were, blown away with what happened when we mixed it with Whistlepig. But we're absolutely, I think realistically, we're not expecting people to have a different type of water for every different region of Scotland, for every country. I just can't see that really working. So I think where we may change going forward is we may have a soda water, and we may have some variants to our water, shall I say. So there's a couple of ideas floating around, but at the moment we're just trying to get sort of Larkfire acknowledged, and we really want it to sort of play a part in tastings and help people, because what we found is it's just a good way to help bring out some of the flavour and the notes for people who maybe don't like to take it neat, and especially with the amount of cask strength whiskey being drunk. I think it's got a place in that area, and certainly for tastings that I think having a water that is not the star and it's about the whiskey can only sort of be a help, really.
No, that's a great thing. New Dram Drinker again has a fantastic question, which is on my list of questions to ask, which has not gotten to it yet. Why did you go for a can rather than a glass bottle? Because the can is really nice, and this is enough enough water for arguably a bottle of whiskey. But why a can as opposed to a small bottle? Is that sustainability? Was it packaging? What's the thought process there?
Right. Well, there's a couple of thought processes to this. Firstly, sustainability. So the can is much lighter than glass. We were never ever going to put it in plastic. It's one of the things we discussed when we were talking to the Stornoway Trust as well. Is this sort of idea of plastic and the close relationship of the communities and the islands with the ocean and water. There's no way we're going to put it in plastic. So that was automatically, there was no chance. And then in terms of glass, what we found is we thought that the small can is very light, so it means it doesn't cost as much to travel. With the glass, we didn't like the shapes of bottles either. We think that if you took it down to a 25 ml bottle, they look like they're sort of short bottles. They're really hard to transport anywhere, and also they don't stack. They haven't got in terms of marketability as well. They don't have a sort of broad canvas to work with. We like the way the can looked. If we could have done a smaller can, we probably would have considered it. However, with the can the size it is, it enables people to maybe have 3 or 4 drinks. They may add more water. They may change the dram in between, and they may want to just swill out, like I did actually, just swill down my glass with some water. And we're also conscious that hydration is important. So keeping people hydrated when they're drinking, is not a bad thing. So I think we were never going to put it in plastic. The glass is very heavy, and we sort of didn't like the sort of small bottles. And the can just enables us to give people a little bit more water. They may not put it all into their whiskey, but hopefully they'll drink it anyway, because it's quite delicious. The water's really nice on its own, but it's good for cleaning the palate in between whiskies, or also swilling your glass out, but also making it a longer drink. I've certainly been drinking quite long drinks while it's been warm. So it's quite nice just to tip in a full can and have a longer, a longer whiskey and water, like the Japanese, I guess.
No, exactly. And in a highball with a few, after we finish up, I am definitely going to take this outside. Fill up a glass with some water and whiskey and sit out in the sun, because I can't think of anything that would be more relaxing.
Yeah.
And with the Whiskey Novice has popped in with a question here as well. Simon, the Whiskey Novice, glad to see you, Simon. How are you getting Larkfire into various whiskey shops? Which brings me on to a question I wanted to ask: where can we purchase Lark? Is this through your store? Is it through things like Master of Malts, or is it through something else?
Well, obviously, currently we're all struggling to sort of progress some of the conversations we've been having sort of early in the year. We do sell Larkfire online from our own store, from our website. We're pretty hopeful that we'll get into a few of the whiskey shops. We're actually looking at quite a lot of the smaller whiskey shops as well, because we quite like the idea of doing tastings. We like this sort of model of tasting. I suppose it's sort of like almost like a grassroots approach. So delving into sort of the heart of whiskey drinkers. So we hope to team up with a few whiskey shops, and if there's any watching, get in touch, because we're keen to do tastings with them and sort of get to the grassroots of the people drinking and try and get them to understand and know what drinking Larkfire is about. But the plan is to obviously is to move into store. We're not going to do any massive supermarkets or anything like that anytime soon, I don't think, or certainly not this year. And it's just trying to build up an audience and trying to sort of let the Larkfire do the talking, really. We've not a massive company. We haven't got massive budgets, so we're very much sort of street fighting. I think, you know, we're trying to convince people by person, really. So we should be about 10 years time, hopefully. No, yeah. So we'll see how it goes. We're not saying no to people, but obviously there's a process that, you know, we need to go through, which is just not happening at the moment. It's impossible. So you may find us on Amazon quite soon, but we're trying to take small but steady steps, and we're trying to really focus also on working with as many distilleries as possible. You know, we've been to probably about 50 or 60 distilleries in the last 6 months. As soon as we're able to move again, we'll be on our bikes and visiting hopefully another 50. I'm hopefully getting over to Ireland as well. Seeing some of those guys who we met last year, who are all really keen to get involved. So yeah, it's a process, I suppose, and you know, we're trying to do as well as we can and move as fast as possible. But you know, we're trying to do it in a considered way as well.
Oh, fantastic. For anyone who's watching, we've got it up on the screen now, but you could head to larkfire.com-buy to pick up your own couple of cans. Really fantastic stuff, and couldn't recommend it more. Moving away from Larkfire for a moment and heading on to James, what's your background with whiskey? Because you said this entire conversation, all of Larkfire started when you were sitting down, you were having a dram with a friend. Yeah. Where did your whiskey journey kind of begin?
Right. Well, that's an interesting question. My whiskey journey began actually playing rugby. So I was telling you, you know, my father was Scottish. I was an all right rugby player. I played a bit for the London, the Scottish Exiles, sort of university under 21s, which was great fun. So heading up to Edinburgh a lot. And then I played bit of rugby at London Scottish, and I remember one dinner, one of the guys worked for Chivas, and we had our end of season dinner, which was in a pub in London somewhere, and it was quite a messy affair with a few South Africans playing for us, and basically bought lots of whiskey, and we started drinking the whiskey, and he gave us this sort of, you know, sort of helped us understand how we should be drinking it and talked us through, you know, the, you know, all the sort of depth of why it's such a great drink, and understanding how to nose and what aromas and tastes we might, you know, take from it. And you've got sort of 20 rugby blokes who've just drunk 10 pints. It's quite a hard job to keep everyone sort of focused on the same thing. And I think that was, and before that, obviously, you know, we used to, you know, celebrate Burns Night and things like that at home, and my father would always get out his whiskey and he'd talk to me about it. And I think it's something that it feels very natural over a period of time. That I don't think it's something that suddenly, I think it takes a period of time to sort of creep up on you almost, and then suddenly you find yourself absolutely in love with whiskey. And that's certainly what happened to me. I think it was a process. I think. And it feels sort of almost part of the spirit, and it seems just sort of, you know, right in terms of, you know, almost like my journey in life. It's sort of this gradual, you know, this gradual enjoyment, and then ultimately, you know, understanding, or I don't say I'd understand it too greatly, but, you know, just the opportunity to try so many different single malts. It's like a massive array. It's like a massive garden of different things to try, and the different nuances, taste, the esters, flavor compounds, and you chuck in Isla and all that peated majesty, and, you know, it's just absolutely incredible. And it's just like this huge array of natural different products that all have a sense of belonging and home. And that's what I love about it. I mean, it really does encapsulate Scottish whiskies, you know, Scotch, sort of encapsulates Scotland. You know, you can feel it, especially if you travel up. It's almost like travel around Scotland. it's like a pilgrimage almost, traveling to these places. I mean, you must have felt it as well, coming from Australia, but going to these distilleries and the history, and you just feel part of it, part of the culture, and part of the country, and it's just a wonderful feeling. And I think that's Scotland itself, has that effect anyway. Just being in Edinburgh and seeing the castle, and it's just, it's awe-inspiring, and it's just got that lovely feeling of, I don't know, destiny in some respects.
Well, I completely agree with that. Edinburgh was actually the first place I lived when I moved to the UK back in 2016, and it was stunning. And that feeling whenever you step into a distillery and you look around, and I would think to myself sometimes, this whiskey has been running longer than Australia has been, like longer than the Federation of Australia. That's an insane feeling to me, where I can think people have been making this drink for that long, and it's amazing. There's all these different working parts, and it's constantly something new. And as well, forgive me for this here, but you're a big rugby fan. How are you feeling about the World Cup?
World Cup. Well, I got over that quite quickly. Do you know what? I think that I've got sort of dual nationality, I suppose, in some respects. So, there was the issue with the cancellation of games and the typhoon. In terms of England losing, I've got this quite cunning little trick anyway. What I do is, dependent on who's winning at halftime, England, Scotland, I change my colours because I think I'm allowed to. So I'd probably support Scotland 70% of the time. Depends on the company, actually, because the English rugby fans aren't particularly nice, but the Scottish rugby fans are great. So I hope no one's watching this who's an English rugby fan. But just brutalised. South Africa were just awesome. I mean, they were amazing. They just earned that victory. I thought they were monsters, and they had a great game. But if it was best of three, I think England probably would have shaded it 2-1. But it's about the game on the night.
I think I'm hesitant to say yes, but I do think definitely best of three, both teams would have won at least one game. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And England definitely played. I love South Africa. I really did. I thought the game of the cup, the game of the championship, was England New Zealand, where the plays were stunning, and it was a new level of rugby. And it did somewhat feel that England played all their game and played all that passion in that game. No disrespect to South Africa, they were amazing, but that was fantastic to watch. I think I was in the Netherlands at that point in time. Everyone was supporting South Africa. Yeah.
But you must be a big cricket fan, aren't you?
No, actually, I am the one Australian who does not give a damn about cricket. And every single time I do a tasting, there's always a question about cricket. Whenever I do a whiskey tasting, it doesn't matter where I am, there's always someone English who's there who will ask about cricket. And I was doing a tasting in 2018, and I finished the tasting, and it was a bunch of regulars. Great turnout, great tasting, and it got to the end, and one of them gave me a piece of sandpaper.
Yeah.
Because there had just been a big scandal about an Australian guy who had been rubbing the ball on sandpaper. I had no idea what it meant, so I just thanked him for the gift, because I thought, well, everyone needs some sandpaper. I had no idea what it meant.
Yeah, well.
No, and it's quite disappointing, because I've got, later on this week, I've actually got Andy Watts from Baines is coming on, who himself was previously a cricketer. And I've got to ignore that entire part of his life, because I have no idea what any of that means.
Well, I suppose I'm not really into Morris dancing either, so, So I suppose it's the same equivalent of an Australian not liking cricket. But No. Yeah, I think. I mean, I think the Premiership's coming back, isn't it, the weekend as well? So I don't know if that's a good thing. I've quite enjoyed the quiet of just, almost, talk of sport, and particularly football just takes over the whole world. I think, particularly in the UK. So that's been quite a nice sort of break, hasn't it? And I think it's coming back with sort of like 100 games in 6 weeks. So phew, that'll be. I don't know. Probably watch a little bit. My kids are mad keen as well. So
I mean, I've seen that, and the stadiums are going to be empty, which is going to be, I think, such a surreal feeling for the players who are used to the constant noise of the crowd, because there's such energy at any sports match, but especially the football one.
yeah,
I think to play to an empty stadium, I'd like to watch just one of the games just to see how the players react.
yeah,
I'm not a footy fan, but I think it's
yeah,
worth a shot.
yeah. I'm
Anyway,
with you on that.
now is a good time to head on to the famed questions and anagrams rounds.
Okay.
Yeah. So I changed them up for yourself because I try to make them as much about rugby as I could. I tried cricket. I really tried to do cricket and whiskey.
That's all right. Don't worry about that.
All right. So my first question I have for you is, which Scottish distillery released a single cask expression that was selected by John Barclay and Damien Hoyland?
Oh, I do know this, actually. Bloody hell. Let me just think about this. I'm going to just write a couple down here. I feel like I'm on,
No,
round or something.
you think about it, and I want to say to Simon, you've got it. You've got it in one. I've got a little comment section here, and Simon has commented with the correct answer. I'm unsure I don't know if you can see it or not. Sometimes people can see, sometimes they can't.
I can't, no. I've read an article about it, I think in SMWS. It's why it's in my head. And I just can't know. I'm going to have to say it. I don't know. Damn.
If you read the article in SMWS work a lot with this company, putting out a lot of things. This was Glen Murray. So it was the Edinburgh Rugby single cask private edition. All profits from the whiskey went to Hearts and Bowls Charity Trust. So it really was something special.
Oh, but that was great.
Right.
I'm imagining it's all gone.
I believe it is, because that was done, I want to say that was 2018, 2019. I've no doubt there'll still be some casks, some bottles floating about. It's worth, I mean, if you do chat with Glen Murray, maybe it's worth asking them to
definitely
have an open bottle that you could have a try of. I got another rugby one for you here. Which whiskey brand is the official partner of Scottish Rugby? This was first announced in 2019 under a 3-year deal.
What was that? Which Scottish whiskey brand is sponsoring the golf, the Scottish Open? Or the Open, sorry? No.
No. I said which whiskey brand is
no, I heard
the
you.
official partner of Scottish Rugby.
Oh God, I do know this as well. So my
It is.
The other founder has a debenture at Murrayfield, so he'll be shouting now what it is if he's watching. But it's not helping me. Text me, Mark. I know this as well, and this is really irritating.
Think massive Scottish whiskey brand. Huge. Not a distillery, it's a brand.
Oh, is it Edrington?
It's not Edrington. Not Edrington.
Oh, bloody hell.
Huge brand, probably the biggest, one of the biggest brands in the world, one of the most recognizable brands in the entire world.
Diageo?
No, it's. I believe Diageo do this whiskey. I
Oh, Johnny
always
Walker.
get confused, but it's a blend.
Johnny Walker.
Yeah, it's Johnny Walker.
He's
Johnny Walker signed a 3-year deal in 2019. They
yeah,
will be the official partners of Scottish Rugby. Um, so
brilliant.
I believe Murrayfield now serves all Johnny Walker, or at least as much Johnny Walker as they can get their hands on. And it's always the house pour is Johnny.
Brilliant.
Simon, yes, you did get that one correct as well. Don't worry, Simon's got he's got
Oh,
the
no, I need
advantage of
an
having
inside
being able
line
to
here.
Google things. So, all right, I got one final question for you, and this one is about whiskey and cricket.
Okay.
And this is going to be difficult. So I might
I might surprise you.
in 2018, the ICC announced a 5-year partnership with a whiskey. Could you tell me the whiskey, or could you tell me the whiskey's country of origin?
Well, I'm going to tell you, it's probably Indian.
You bang on there. It is an
Yeah.
Indian whiskey. Yes.
Right. So what would that be? God. I'm not very. I need to go to India. I need to visit some distilleries over in India. But
I want to tell you, this is an Indian brand. It is not whiskey made in India. The whiskey itself is a blend of of grain spirits and imported Scotch whiskey. Yeah.
And I'm not going to get this, but I deserve half a mark out of 3.
Oh no, I'll give you a full mark for that because I'll give you a full mark for that. There was a bonus point for knowing it. This is Royal Stag in India.
Royal Stag.
Royal Stag. It's a blend of grain spirits and imported Scotch. It is Pernod Ricard's best-selling brand by volume.
Really?
Yeah. Apparently, I can't recall ever trying any myself. For anyone who's watching, if you have tried a bottle, contact us. Tell if it's any good or not. I'll ask Shilton. He'll know.
Yeah.
All right.
Might require a bit of Larkfire, I think.
I mean, I struggle to think of any whiskey that wouldn't be improved by Larkfire, and I'm definitely going to order some more so I can try it with all the different whiskies that I've got to really see what difference there is.
Well, I had a bit of a tasting experiment over Christmas actually, which was quite good fun. But I'm not sure my brother-in-law enjoyed it that much. But we did go through quite a few, and we were doing this sort of trial against sort of tap water and Larkfire and marking them all. I don't know if I've got the sort of marking sheet anywhere, but it was quite a late do, and I think we were quite weary the next day as we had to sort of take kids, out for I think it was Boxing Day walk or something, and I didn't really feel too great. I must admit. I think it worse.
It's always, you always start out with the best intentions when you do a night like that, and you always pay for it. But if you had invented a water that somehow prevented a hangover,
Well, I think it does help.
I think you'd be the most famous man of all time. So
I think it probably helps because obviously reducing the the alcohol level.
No, I've no doubt about that. Now, I have a few anagrams for you here.
Okay.
I've got a couple of whiskey, and then I've got 2 special ones just for you. So, The first anagram, this is a Scottish whiskey distillery. It is Angry Mole.
Angry mole. Angry mole.
Angry mole.
I'm rubbish at this sort of thing. Angry mole. GR. I am starting to feel like I'm on countdown. You like Richard Whiteley? You won't remember that. Angry mole. And not Carol Vorderman. That's the numbers. But angry mole.
I'll tell you, this has been mentioned. This distillery has been mentioned within this broadcast at least twice.
Glen Murray?
It's Glen Murray. Yeah, you got it.
There we go.
You did good there. I
didn't
I'll be
really.
completely honest with you. What? Yeah, you did good there. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I got there. No, I can see that now. It's much easier when you've had a little tip. Because the next one's coming.
Well, I'll not give you any tips for the other ones.
No, I need them. If I knew this was part of the game, I'd have sent someone else.
No. This is
okay.
This is where the fun comes from. You know.
Okay.
If anyone is curious, by the way, I have not made a ladder on who's got so many points. I meant to, and then I didn't.
Thank God.
So eventually, one day, I'll rewatch all of these sections from my quizzes, and I'll make a ladder and see who's on top. All right.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. Your second one is Gaseous of Rum. This is a Scottish blended whiskey.
Oh.
Oh.
No. Grouse. If anyone's watching this and my friends want to text me, that'd be really helpful. I was thinking famous grouse, but I got the grouse out of that. But yeah, we
famous grouse.
Yeah, famous grouse. Yeah, I could see the grouse. There we go. Brilliant. That's a mark. Get in there. Ah. I'm going to just put my phone on now. So if anyone does want to text me any of these answers before I'm not complete fool on myself. Right. Make it an easy one.
That was the difficult one. You did that one really well. You did that exceptionally quickly. All right. So let's go with anagram number 3. Snack Jailed. Ooh. This is an American whiskey.
Jack Daniels.
Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
I think telling you the country of origin isn't too big a hint. Otherwise, I could do any from anywhere.
No, that was good. I'm pleased with the hints, to be honest. I think I need all the help. I'm rubbish at Christmas as well. I'm always in the sort of dunces team, I think. Don't in my team.
I am not allowed to be on my partner's team when it comes to Christmas time or anything like that. She hates playing with me. She's said it because I get competitive, but I think it's because I don't get competitive enough, and she gets really competitive. I think that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Yeah, that's what I think I find. I'm yeah, shunned in a similar way.
I've said on more than one occasion, it's just about having fun. And I've been told by the entire family, it's not about that. It's about winning.
So true.
Okay. Your fourth anagram, second last anagram, is referee TV. This is a popular brand of mixer. This is not a whiskey. This is not an alcoholic beverage.
Oh, well, I can tell you what this is. This one is Fever Tree.
Fever Tree is correct. Yes.
Amazing.
Referee TV is an anagram of Fever Tree.
Yeah.
All right. One more.
The grand finale.
The grand finale.
I've got my head in.
I accidentally rubbed out. Say again.
I've got my head around this now. I think I'm starting to show a bit of skill. Well, I think the last two have been a bit easier though, and I think you've been hinting quite strongly as well.
No, I've always found once you do a few anagrams, your brain starts to see them more easily. And gaseous of rum was the difficult one. Famous grouse is a killer. Anyway, your last anagram, the final question, is Friar Elk. Come on, James. This is not a whiskey. It is Larkfire. It is Larkfire.
Oh my god! I was going to say something rude then, but I just held back at the right time. Yes, Friar Elk. In fact, it's a brilliant name. I think that should I'll write that one down to use in future.
No, you're fine. And by all means, you're allowed to say anything you want to me. It doesn't matter. You can swear, you can say anything.
No, it's good when you fire out. That'll catch on.
Friar Elk. I'm going to get myself a nice can of Friar Elk. Dude, you did great through those. You did awesome. That was fantastic.
Great. It reminded me of Christmas. Which is good.
Hey, every Malts with Mates is just like Christmas. It's some guy in a chair getting drunk asking questions. Anyway, just to wrap up, firstly, I want to say thanks to you for coming on. Thanks to you for taking the time out of your day to tell us about your company, your brand, and your water, which sound fantastic. Where can people who are watching now and later, where can people follow you? Where can they find out more about Lark? Where can they get to see all your tasting?
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me as well. Really appreciate that. So you can find out about us on our sort of social channels. So Twitter, we are at Larkfire, and then also we're on Instagram and Facebook. Newly on Facebook. We're quite slow to Facebook, but we're now on Facebook as well. And you can find out everything that's happening there, and also on the website as well. I think, as you mentioned, we're trying to have have quite a few tastings, and we'll continue to do that, I think, through the year. So just keep an eye out. We're doing one with Wolfburn on the 26th of June, which should be fun. And we've got sort of various competitions. We like to get as many people on and new people new to the brand onto these tastings as possible. And actually, they're normally, well, they've all been free so far, and they probably will remain so for the next few months, particularly probably into towards the end of the year. We just want to encourage people to try it and tell us what they think, actually. And it's been great partnering with some brilliant whiskey distilleries, whiskey brands like Jura and Highland Park and Wolfburn, brilliant. Mark Westmoreland is a bit of a legend. So, it's all about trying things, and that's what we want to encourage people to do, and to enjoy the whiskey. And the more people trying Larkfire, the better. So, we're really encouraged, and it's been really enjoyable. So, the more the merrier, I guess.
No, that's fantastic to hear. And that was the 26th of June, did you say?
Yeah, 26th of June. I think we're doing. We're hoping to do a live stream on Facebook with that one. And then I think the plan is to do 2 or 3 more for July and August. And I think if you sort of follow our social channels, I'm sure there'll be some competitions and some places going. So we try and encourage as many people. Actually, if you ask, we probably will deliver. So if you do want to get on one of these tastings, if you ask, we probably will find a space for you. Well, within reason.
Everyone is watching. Make sure you.
So
everyone is watching. Make sure you ask, and if you can't ask, then tune in and let people know, because this is something that's incredibly important, and you're a brand new company, and we want to support you. Once again, mate, thanks for coming on today, and I hope you've had a good time. I know I've had a good time. I know everyone who's been watching has had a good time. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with before we finish?
No, Simon, I just want to say thanks, really. Thanks for having me. And also, just look out for us, and hopefully, if you're interested in joining us on a tasting, get in touch through Twitter or Facebook or one of the channels, and hopefully we'll find a spot for you, and you can see the difference. Or alternatively, just sort of try it. I think it's worth a try, and it's worth, I think, doing a taste test against tap water is interesting. But we're interested in all feedback, and ultimately what we want people to do is enjoy the whiskey and have a good time and enjoy that. So that'd be great.
No, fantastic. Well, thanks to everyone for tuning in. I've been Some Whiskey Bloke, and I've been joined here by... Say your name, James.
Oh, James. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, brilliant.
Oh, no worries.
Thanks
to everyone. Thank you to James, and Slanch. Stay safe, everyone.
Cheers. Slanch.
Cheers.